All right. Well, welcome back to Musings of an Extrovert. My name is Darvin Muentes. I am your host and your resident extrovert. Thank you all who have been listening for a while now. You guys have been awesome, and I want you to know that I make this content for you. I sit down every week and try to get someone to interview just for you guys, so you guys can have some fun content to listen to while you're driving to work, while you're driving home from work, and so you can discuss some things that are talked about with your friends. So like always, please like and subscribe. Go ahead and hit that bell notification if you're listening on YouTube. That way you can get notified every single time an episode drops. Well, today my guest is this is a fun guest for me, and hopefully it's fun for this guest to be on the podcast. This is my future father-in-law, Gregory Woodard.
Hello, Darvin. Hey, it's great to be here. And I told Darvin a while ago, I said you need to have an introvert on your podcast. So I am your resident introvert. So how about that?
He is the resident introvert for the day, and I'm very excited about that. Typically, my resident introvert, my more regular resident introvert, is your daughter.
That is true. She is probably not quite as introverted as I am, but she definitely is an introvert on that side of the scale.
Yeah. When so this is not at all within the scope of our questions, but when did you kind of like really think about the fact that, oh man, I recharge much more when I'm on my own, when I'm doing things on my own? When did you first like realize that?
Yeah, I look back and I've always had introverted tendencies. I was a loner in school. I've always had a very small circle of friends. I think I began to understand this dynamic of recharging alone with alone time when I really picked up on it when I was in my first real job outside of seminary. I was a dean of men at a faith-based drug and alcohol recovery program.
Mm-hmm.
And that required a lot of people interaction every day, multi-hours a day. I would be across the desk with the student or out and about walking through the facility. And I knew I needed to take a break in the mid-afternoon, shut my door, and have nobody knocking, nobody asking me anything. I needed a little bit of time to recoup. And I would even take an hour out of some parts of the day and I'd go for a run. And that was probably the first time and I think I had enough understanding of personalities in general that I began to understand that dynamic of introvert, extrovert. People drain me and learned extroverted skills. I think probably also when I got married, Vicky's definitely an extrovert and does not recharge alone. I mean, she has a need. She doesn't enjoy alone time, but she's going to find she exercises with somebody. That's her preferred way. I prefer to exercise alone. So those are probably the two biggest areas. And then in my current environment as a chaplain, it's the same. I have a lot of people interaction, and I know sometimes I need to close my office door. So probably, that early ministry job.
Yeah.
Before the chaplaincy.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, if you're really spending a ton of time with a bunch of other people, that's likely gonna, if you need time alone, that's likely gonna reveal that fact.
Absolutely.
And if you don't need it as much, which I think all people need some amount of time alone, but it's not as valued by some as it is by others, because of the fact that for some it is going to be that ability to rejuvenate in that time. So for instance, you working out alone, that's an interesting dynamic, but it makes sense to me because, well, if working out gives you energy, typically it will release endorphins, it'll release things that will let you feel energized. If you're an introvert and you get more energized from being alone, it would make sense that you feel better after a workout if you weren't interacting with others.
Yeah, I interact all the time. People are always asking me for things, or telling me the challenges of their life. And for me, being able to put in a pair of headphones, listen to a podcast or an audio book, and work out alone, ride my bike, row. I don't run anymore, but the rowing and biking are the normal things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
It gives my brain a chance to stop and to be filled with something that is edifying to me.
Yep.
It definitely is a personal alone exercise. I mean, in the military we do a lot of group stuff too, but it's definitely my preferred, and it really is an important part of my self-care.
Yeah, that makes sense. So tell our audience, besides being an introvert, something interesting about yourself. What's a fun fact about Greg Woodard?
Yeah, so I have a lot of interesting different experiences. I guess the thing that surprises a lot of people is that I was enlisted Marine when I was a younger man. I turned 20 in boot camp in San Diego. I turned 21 in Okinawa.
Wow.
So I guess that's a surprise for people. They don't look at me and think that I was a Marine at one point in my life. But that's and then the other interesting factoid, maybe we'll get into a little bit more, is that I got out of the military for a long period of time. And then I came back in, so I have two different services. I have Marine Corps life as an enlisted guy, and then I came back in my early 40s into the Navy chaplaincy. And so I have two active stints of military duty that have been completed. Well, the second one's nearing completion. Mm-hmm. That I have done in two very different phases of my life and in two very different kinds of environments. So.
Yeah. So my audience loves when I talk about Liana. They love Liana. I mean, who doesn't? She is incredible, and they also love kind of that, just the fun dynamics of the different things we talk about. When I have Liana on the show, we talk about some wedding planning stuff. We talk about differences between her and I. So here's a fun Liana-related question for you. How did you feel the very first time Liana brought me home to visit?
I could answer that question a lot of different ways. We've raised both of our children. I also have a son. If you're listening, I'm proud of you as well. This is a focal point moment on Liana. And I'm thinking about how we've raised both of our children with a distinct set of values. I tried to create an environment where both of them could grow and be the people that they are. And one thing that, as they've both entered into adult life, I trust both of my children to have strong values, to make wise decisions. They both are flourishing as adults. And I knew Liana, I know her well enough to know that when she decided that she was going to bring a guy to our home, that there was a likelihood that they had really already been thinking about that maybe this is the one. Liana's not been one that's dated very much over the course of her journey. And so when I met you, I remember I drove up to on a military base. If you don't, Darvin and Leon don't have access, so they have to have somebody escort them onto the base. So I met them at the gate where that would happen. And that was the first moment that I met Darvin. I was wearing my uniform. I was coming from work. Mm-hmm. And so that's the one thing. I knew if she brought you, in this case it was you, home, mm-hmm. that she was very serious, and it was something that you were somebody that I knew that I had a great deal of comfort believing that I would be able to trust you as a young man to take care of my daughter. So that's the big thing, is trusting Liana. When I first met you, I knew a little bit about you. Liana had obviously shared a little bit, and we were all pretty excited. So I think, it was I watched your exuberance, the way that you cared for her. I noticed that that you obviously were somebody who had a lot of ideas for what the future would hold, had a good plan. We enjoyed watching you interact with Liana and the joy that you brought to her. Those are all things that I remember observing and noticing when we first met you.
Yeah. How did you feel about this infamous list that Liana sent?
Oh yeah, that's a funny story. So here's a funny for Liana. So we had, I believe it was a 19-item list that had been sent. Vicky got a text or an email. I don't remember how she sent it, but it was a request list for Darvin, things that Darvin liked or didn't like.
Oh man!
And so I became aware of it. So there was a little part of me that I'm sure I probably made a comment like, well, this guy must be a real diva. But then the real part of that statement is that is so typical of Liana. She's so aware and in tune with what another person desires, likes, needs. She's very selfless.
Yep.
She notices things. And so there was some of what I just said was a little bit facetious. I didn't think Darvin was a diva. But what I did understand was that Liana really liked Darvin because she took the time to send us a list to make sure that Darvin would be comfortable when we didn't have just Trop 50 orange juice, we had real orange juice. There's a few other things but that's the one I remember.
Oh my
so yeah, it's still funny, a fun thing that we like to tease her a little bit on is.
That was a really fun trip. That very first visit was a really fun one. We teased Liana together, you, me, and David pretty
David
regularly.
Was here.
The cookies, like story, kooky, all of that stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on into some stuff about you. So you already kind of shared a little bit about your story. So when you were 20, you turned 20 in boot camp, you turned 21 in Okinawa. Tell us a little bit about your experience across the Marines, into the Navy, into being a chaplain in that, your story from going from military life to civilian life back into military life, all of that.
Yeah, I could take the entire podcast and tell you that story. So I'll compress it down. This is going to be like 30 years of my life compressed down into a couple-minute statement. So I have a total of 19 years of service. I hit 19 years on the 1st of September. In 2023, this time next year, I'll hit 20 years and I'll retire. So yeah, there's I wish I had a reason other than the reason that I'm going to express for why I joined the Marine Corps. I got tired of looking for a job. It was I didn't do real well in college. The first time I have attained multiple academic degrees since then, but the first go around was not a pretty sight. Mm-hmm. So I left college and then just frankly got tired of looking for a job. So I ended up at a recruiting center. The Marines were the most responsive, and Marines are Marines, and you have to understand the culture a little bit to understand this statement, but they are. I've been in the Navy and the Marine Corps and been around other services, so I know other services are going to have some disagreement with what I'm getting ready to say. The Marines are the sharpest dressers in their uniform. They take the most pride in the way they wear their uniform. And their uniform doesn't change. So they look sharp in their blues. All that to say, I showed up at the recruiting center. They were very responsive, very professional. And before I knew it, I was enlisted. Obviously, I had shared this with my mom and dad. At that point, I was 19, so still needed a little bit of. I didn't need the approval from mom and dad, but my mom and dad relationship was very good, so I had to make sure they understood the why and were comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. All that happened. I enlisted. My first tour, as I said earlier, was in Okinawa. and I'd probably never been more than an hour away from home, away from my parents my entire childhood. So that was a big, so going off to boot camp, flying from Des Moines to San Diego, and then going through the training process, did my MOS training, my occupational specialty training in Alabama, and then from there had a little bit of leave, and then flew to Okinawa. So I did that, enlisted, did my time as a Marine enlisted. I was an ammunition warehouseman, did some administrative work, and then went through a long period of time between services, had a variety of jobs. One of them was the one I mentioned earlier. There were a few others along the way in there. I married Vicky, worked on and completed my college and seminary degree. And then a friend of mine went into the chaplaincy. I declined at that time. He asked me to consider it. I said no. But then life happened. Organizational changes required some changes. My dad died in the late, would have been about 2007. I'm probably getting the date wrong, but my dad passed. And that just caused me to do some reevaluation of my life. An Army chaplain recruiter contacted me. Mm-hmm. I said yes initially to the Army, but then switched my package over. Remembered my roots as a Marine. Navy chaplains served the Marines. They served the Coast Guard and the Navy as well. And then, obviously the service the type of service that we do as chaplains is very different than the enlisted. We're here to support the enlisted. Chaplains are non-combatants, mm-hmm. So we're here to support the war fighter. Very different services, very different time of my life. I was married, had 2 young children, so I uprooted all 3 of them into a life that was very different than what Leon and Dave were too young really to understand what the dynamic was, but it turned their life in a very different direction than it otherwise would have. So that's the short version of the 2 different services. And then that time as a civilian, it gives me a lot of Marines, especially when you get into the senior enlisted world. It's all they've really ever known for their entire adult life. And having some experience of what life is like outside of the military is a benefit.
Yeah, for sure. I just thought about this. You could say this about a million of our decisions. I feel like every decision has some sort of implication in the future that you just don't know about. But had you not chosen the military, then you guys likely would have never gone to Norfolk and Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads. So I likely would never have met the woman that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So, or this particular woman. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of things. There's any number of different points in my life that I could point to. Originally, when I came out of the Marine Corps, my original plan was to go back to Southern California and go to college. If I'd have done that, I never would have met Vicky.
Yep.
I met Vicky when I was on staff at a church.
Yep.
Out of college. So the whole of my life, I can. I'm a little more seasoned. I have a little less hair than Darvin has, and so I've lived a lot of life, and I have a lot of years to look back on, and I can see different points where I call them inflection points. Yep. A decision was made that profoundly impacted the course of the rest of the later years.
Yeah.
And one of them is definitely that our children would have had an entirely different experience, would have met very different kinds of people.
Yep.
As they grew into adulthood, and they both would I think say that this life that I chose, as it was me that chose it along with Vicky, was challenging for them. I like to believe that it created some resilience in them, but I know it was also challenging.
Yeah.
But the blessing of having experienced a variety of places is very different than the upbringing that I had, which I had a very good upbringing, but I never really moved away from home.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about the same for me. I mean, like we moved from Bronx, New York to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. First moved to Annville, Pennsylvania, and lived near the center of Annville, which someday we have to take a trip all together to Pennsylvania. If you guys move back to Hampton Roads, that'll be an easy thing to do at that point, you know?
Yeah, there's something about chocolate in Pennsylvania that I have a great interest in visiting.
Yes.
So I think it's
Yes.
a place called Hershey,
Yep.
Pennsylvania. So
And
there's
it's not far from my house back at home. So.
that's not the only reason I want to visit Pennsylvania. But the interesting thing, Darvin, is that would be a great experience. But I've never been back to where Vicky grew up.
Really?
So it's just not ever worked in the sequence of the way
Wow.
that our lives have been.
Yeah.
Trips have been made there, but I haven't been able to be on those trips because of military commitments.
Wow.
So that is another trip that we probably
Yeah.
have to make at some point.
So is
Need
that
make
going to
at
be
some point.
on the docket when retirement
Well,
comes around?
I have a list in my head based on a question Darvin prepped me with, and North Dakota's not on it, but I might now have to add it since it's been brought up in this podcast.
Yeah, so she's probably heard it over there too. So right now I have a speaker set up in the house for Liana and Vicky to be able to listen to our conversation. So I think they might have heard that. So you might have to make a trip. That might have to be the first one. So what cool things do you have coming up? So you let everyone know that you're coming up on retirement, 20 years in the service. Thank you for that service, by the way. But 20 years, so retirement's coming up. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to in the future?
Well, first and foremost, I'm looking forward to retiring from the military. I've had a great ride in the military. As Darvin just said, I've done 20 years. So first and foremost, I'm very excited that it's a transition point that will come in the next, a year from now. Interesting things that we got planned. We want to do some traveling. We're both still, I'm retiring from the military but I'm not retiring from work. So we're both going to be doing work of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
But I have an idea that I want to take Vicky to Portugal. I got to do almost a week stay in Portugal on my way back from which is now my last deployment, my shipboard deployment.
Mm-hmm.
This year we've got we got to travel. We got a trip coming up to Asheville. We get to go to the Billy Graham Center as military chaplains. That'll probably be the last military chaplain experience that we get to go do for that. I haven't told Vicky this one yet, so she's probably hearing me say this, but we have a potential opportunity to go to Puerto Rico.
Oh, that's
with
fun.
with some things that I'm doing right now. My family's all back in Iowa, so we both get a certain number of days of vacation / leave. It never has felt like we have the time to do a drive. We've driven across the country a couple of times with moving.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking about doing a road trip back to the Midwest. That'll be coming up. Those are the big things. We probably got a few other things along the way.
Yeah. So those are kind of like trips. Do you have? And you said that you're not done with work. Do you have work lined up already, or are you planning on doing some type of business venture?
Yeah. So I have an LLC. I formed an LLC back in early part of this year. Coaching business. So I coach. I do some leadership and life and Enneagram coaching. So I formed an LLC around that. That business is only just beginning. Along the way, I work with a couple of clients. Eventually, in the next little while, some educational things. Maybe I'm planning to build out an online course. Do some group coaching. Want to do a membership site. Maybe podcasting will be something that I'll do. Want to write a book. There's a lot of things that I think outside and being outside of the military environment, that LLC, the business, will give me a chance to develop into whatever that will look like into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had any kind of leisure projects that you've been working on that, for the times when you're not coaching, for the times when you're not, I don't know, doing vacationing or anything like that, all the other times that you're going to have to fill within your retirement time? What are some of those leisurely things that you'd like to do?
I've never been one to work with my hands. Vicky will tell you that it's never been important to me to have like the immaculate garage. If you walk out to my garage right now, you'll see that I don't really have an organizational system. But I've had this thing in the back of my mind that maybe, Dave has talked to me a little bit. He said, Dad, we got to get, and he picked a certain kind of motorcycle. He picked a Triumph. Other people have told me there's other bikes that might be better suited to this, but irregardless, some maybe like we've talked about getting a bike, and that needs a lot of repair work, and then just working towards restoring it.
Mm-hmm.
I've toyed with the idea of getting a classic car of some sort and doing that, but people who know me would be like, that's going to go nowhere because you don't ever work with your hands. But so I mean, I like to write. I do a bit of writing.
Mm-hmm.
My big thing right now is looking out my windows and watching the birds. So we got a little bird arboretum.
Yeah. I love these birds. They're already on the bird feeders over here right now. We got some. What is that? Is that a dove? Like
we have all kinds. If my mom were here, she'd be able to tell you all the different kinds of birds that we have show up. We have robins and bluebirds and orioles and a variety of others. I also like to bike, so I bike some. And I guess it's one of my hobbies is to bike. So that's, maybe I'll be able to, I do enough, like do 10, 12 miles, but maybe I begin to work towards, I don't know, a century ride or a 50-mile ride or something of that nature.
Yeah. So if you guys go to Puerto Rico, there is, it is beautiful out there. You are going to get some good food. Are you guys planning on going to San Juan? Is that where, is this potential opportunity going to be in San Juan, or is it going to be elsewhere in Puerto Rico?
So I don't know anything about what might happen. I'm doing some training with somebody right now, and he's talked about the possibility of doing a face-to-face retreat with his cohort. So I don't know any details. I have been to Ponce. I spent 2 days on the island of Ponce when I was on board the ship. We pulled in, and I got to go ashore with some Marines and sailors and do a community relations project. Mm-hmm. So I've been on the ground in Puerto Rico, just very briefly. Have some friends that spent he did one Coast Guard tour in Puerto Rico. But to answer your question more directly, Darvin, I don't know where it's at. I would imagine it's in a pretty nice area, Puerto Rico.
Yep.
But beyond that, I don't have any idea.
Yeah. Well, if you get a chance to go to Puerto Rico for any length of time, it is an awesome place to go to. Now, the name isn't going to make you excited about going to it. So I'll just say it's an island off of Puerto Rico that you have to take a boat to get to. But it's beautiful white sands, gorgeous crystal blue water. They have cabanas that have little restaurants in there, and it's a really, really great spot. It's called La Isla de Culebras, which means Island of Snakes.
That makes me want to go. I am a snake fan. No, actually,
oh my gosh. So tell me a little bit about this coaching business. Tell me what gets you excited about coaching. Why did you start the coaching business? What made you want to get into it?
Yeah, I think I've done informal coaching for most of my adult life. I think of coaching as walking a journey alongside people. In my professional world now as a chaplain, people are coming to me and wanting, real specific guidance on suggested next steps.
Yeah.
Coaching is very different than that. It's really asking people good questions that help them to formulate their own journey into what they want to be in their own journey of self-discovery. My big thing in coaching is I like to walk the journey with people as they take a deep dive into who they are as people. And I think once you understand yourself at the deepest level, that can have a profound impact on your vocation, on the work that you do. That can have a profound impact on your relationships. And it really goes to the point of when you really understand how you're wired, it helps you to really move with confidence into alignment with who God has wired you to be. And it goes into all those different things I just mentioned, into your vocation, it goes into your relationships, and it creates an opportunity for you to live your best and most flourishing life. So that is my goal in coaching, is to help people align themselves to who they are at the truest, deepest sense of who they are, and to then walk confidently in that, and whatever that means in the rest of their life. It could mean that they make some vocational changes. I trust it'll help them in the way they relate to people. I think when people understand who, like if you're talking about a married couple, when you understand yourself at a deep level, when you understand your spouse at a deep level, it can really it changes the way that you relate. So really, that's what I'm all about, is really wanting to help people live their best life.
Yeah, that's awesome. How have you seen throughout your life your faith influence your desire to help coach people?
Well, I think it took me a long time to, we jokingly say, military people will jokingly say that we'll ask each other, what are you gonna do when you grow up? And a lot of us are still trying to figure out what we're gonna do when we grow up. I think there's a couple things that I would say in response to that, Darvin. My one thing is that when I understood, well, you asked me earlier about when I understood that I needed alone time as an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
Introverts, we're not going to be the life of the party. Social gatherings, I enjoy them if I can find another introvert. But really, and Vicky is part of that journey with me as we move into social environments, relationships. I do love people, and I think sometimes the misnomer of an introvert is that we don't like people. But I think that's an example of having a strong sense of self-awareness. I think when we understand how we're wired at our deepest levels, how God has wired us, how our personalities were formed, we're more apt to live a flourishing life, because we're more apt to be doing things in alignment with who we are. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's and then the other part of it is this whole relational dynamic with God. So I think coaching, helping people to understand how God created them, opens up a new avenue for relationship with God as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's important, is to know the things of yourself, the things that give you energy, the things that make you feel good, the things that make you feel bad. I think in a lot of ways, knowing the things that make you feel bad is a really great way of figuring out vocation. Because the things that make you feel good, while some of those things that make you feel good can be work, some of those things also are going to be very hard to make you feel work. So if you know, or to give you work, for instance, music. I love music. Music makes me feel very, very good. It can be a possible career. It's not a probable career for me. Thus, I don't like feeling like I can't, eat today if I don't go out and play for 6 hours and make money. I don't like that feeling. So knowing that I don't like that feeling means, hey, maybe I should choose something else that I like to be my vocation. Or at least if I want to get there, I need to figure out a different way to get there. Because I knew the thing that I didn't like and that I don't enjoy or don't feel. And most people don't enjoy not having a plate of food on their table most days. So, I mean, sometimes you don't want to eat, but that means there's probably some other stuff that's going on. Not the normal human response is to want to have a meal, and I know that I don't like that feeling. And also within my own business. So this is actually something that I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs say, but I've also heard a lot of entrepreneurs say on the other side, to the opposite of this as well, that a lot of these big name entrepreneurs, the reason they became successful, they attribute to the fact that they were desperate, and that desperateness gave them the hunger to succeed. Whereas there are other entrepreneurs that build their business on the side of working, and so that's what I'm doing, is I'm building my business while I'm still working and putting food on the table on the other side, because I know that I need to have food on the table. And I've also been in the situation of not having a job and having to put food on the table, and I knew what that felt like, and I didn't like that feeling. And I didn't want to give myself that feeling again. So being able to put food on the table and then work on this on the side. I mean, I'm working on it. This right here is part of that, working on that business. So how have you felt within, so I know that you're moving off into retirement. However, you're looking for some other things to be doing on a regular basis. How do you feel that kind of like pull and tug? Like, do you want to run into just doing your business full time, and you're in a different situation, you're getting closer to retirement, so you probably have stuff saved up, so you're not feeling like, oh, there's not going to be food on the table, but it's still that, do I jump into a business on its own, or get a job and work on a business?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question. I have the same, as I've walked through some training with some different people. One thing I understood in a recent training opportunity, in a recent coaching opportunity I had, somebody was coaching me. She asked me a very specific question. It was about this idea of, what is it that you really want? And it was a question I thought about. But one thing I say when people ask me, the why of the business, well, I say I want the work to be where I am. I have spent, and I'm not in any way disparaging being involved in the context of organizations. I've been inside of an organizational setting, and frankly, I don't know what the percentages are, but many people spend most of their adult life, if not all of their adult working life, working in the context of an organization. My dad spent 40 years working in the context of an organization. I've spent the majority of actually all of it's been different organizations. My dad had a path in one organization. I've had a path in a variety of organizations, but the common denominator is it's been inside of an organization. And when Vic and I decided that I was going to retire this coming year from the military, one thing that I committed to, and one of the reasons was I didn't want to work inside of an organization. Now, having said that, as I've moved closer to retirement, that decision was back in the February timeframe. And now as I'm under a year, I have a lot of education. So there's some educational reasons behind this point of my conversation. My answer is I have a desire to explore the possibility of working inside of a church organization. Maybe looking at that at some point as I'm moving, obviously Darvin's just said it, I'm moving towards the real retirement, which will be probably another decade or so. But moving into a place where I could do coaching, business, my coaching business, and whatever else that becomes part-time, and with a good return on the investment, and then continuing inside of a church structure to add some value in that kind of a setting too.
Yeah.
So I think as I've been moving towards the what's the next thing, it feels like at least that's a possibility. But I want the coaching. I still have a very strong desire to be in a specific area, and I don't desire in my retirement to chase the job and to go where the job is at. I want the job to be where I am at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
somehow mixing and matching both of those together
Yeah.
is what I desire to do.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, that sounds a little bit like, said in other words, I don't want to work for someone else the rest of my life. I want to be able to do work because, so your businesses and services or products, they are working for someone else, but the person that I want to work for is the client. I don't want to work for the organization. So, when it comes to, like, for instance, I work at Regent University now. Love my job. I think it's an incredible place to be, incredible workplace. My work-life balance, it allows me to be able to work on my business. But I want to further that mission as far as I can further my mission to build my business, to build my marketing agency, to build this podcast, and to build my family, to be able to offer my services to the world, and then make a departure from working in the organization. All the while, adding value to another organization and serving people by doing that. But at that point, then if there's anyone working for anyone, it's going to be someone working for me, and we're working for the client together. And I won't be the one working for someone else. And that's what drives me to build this. Yeah. That's what drives me to actually do all this, and why, the desperation doesn't necessarily give me any strength or vigor, other than the fact that I just am looking for, financial stability, which I can get in a job, and then I can actually let the fire of desiring to be out drive me,
Yeah, I think that's a big part of what I think about with coaching too. It's a chance to continue to add value to people, and to narrow the field of the people that I work with. I find a lot of value in kind of everybody has access to me in my current professional world, and that's important, and they need it. But I think as you move into as you work as I work towards my to grow my business, there really is an ideal client base that I'm looking at, and a very specific kind of person that I want to work with. And I think there's value in understanding the kind of person that you want to work with and the kind of client that you want to work with. And then some that aren't going to be suited to what you can offer. And I think if you understand that, you can add the value to the right kind of people that will be able to receive the most value from what you're trying to offer them.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. How can people find you? How can they find where they can do coaching with you? If they'd like to do coaching, how can they figure out if coaching is something that they need? Where can they go?
Well, the best place to find out more about me and to access what I offer is at it's my name.com, Greg Woodard, GregWoodard.com. Very simple. I really desire to work with people in guided conversations, helping them to gain clarity about their truest self and gain confident alignment with who God wired them to be and with their God-given purpose for their life.
Yeah. Well, I will be linking to his website in the description. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it was great to be part of this, Darvin. I appreciate being invited to be the resident introvert on the Musings of an Extrovert podcast.
Well, I'm sure we'll probably have you back on the show in the future, as you're going to be my father-in-law. So, whenever we want to do a podcast episode together, we can.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not just because I'm going to be your father-in-law.
Well,
but there is
makes it easier access.
That is a built-in advantage. Yes, that is very true, and that is why we desire to live. Part of why we desire to live in Virginia Beach, to be near Darvin, Liana, and then whatever is added to their family in the future.
Oh, man. Well, thank you, everyone who is listening to the podcast. Again, you guys make it worth it. I am so excited that I get to do this all the time. And it's been fun. It's been fun getting to interview people. So go ahead and subscribe, leave a comment, go ahead and hit that bell notification. So you can get notified every time we drop an episode. If you're listening on YouTube, we will have another interview after this one. I am going to do my best, and I have been trying to do my best to line up interviews for you guys, since I know you guys like them, and they're fun. I enjoy doing them. I enjoy talking to people. And some time now, my interviews, they're starting to become very long because we have nice conversations, really fun conversations. So I may start splitting some of these episodes up, and you guys might get to listen to some fun episodes of, one person who you might get to hear twice. And that would be pretty fun. So if you guys like that, go ahead and leave some comments, to let me know that you guys want that to happen. If you haven't yet, I have this competition going on, and you guys should totally do it. If you can get 4 people to message me separately with your name and a question of their own, you will be entered to win a Musings of an Extrovert blanket. That will end next month in October, so please go ahead and do that. Go let 2 people who don't listen to or 4 people, who don't listen to the show, have them email me at muentesandco@gmail.com, and we'll talk. You can also tell them to go to muentesco.com/podcast and hit the Ask Me Anything button, and that'll take them to my request form, and they can ask their question that way. Well, this has been awesome. My name is Darvin Muentes. I am your resident extrovert, and
Greg Woodard, your resident introvert. It was a joy to be on your podcast, Darvin.
That was Musings of an Extrovert. Thank you, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.